"You're the worst hire we've ever made," my manager declared in front of the entire sales team. My name is Sarah, and I was completely destroyed by the woman who was supposed to be my leader. Picture me sitting in that glass conference room at TechFlow Solutions, 23 of my sales colleagues staring at me while my manager Lisa's words echoed off the walls like a death sentence. "You're the worst hire we've ever made." The snickers that followed felt like acid burning through my chest. My hands trembled as I gripped my coffee mug, the one that said "World's Best Account Manager," that my mom had given me for my birthday. 2 years of 60-hour weeks, 2 years of believing I was building something meaningful, and this is how it ends. Everyone I had worked alongside, people I'd grabbed lunch with at Chipotle, people who'd borrowed my car charger during client visits, were now exchanging glances and barely suppressed smirks at my expense. I wanted to disappear, to crawl under the mahogany table and never come out. But then something happened that nobody, including myself, could have predicted. Before I tell you exactly what happened next, can you guess what Lisa didn't know about me? Because what I'm about to reveal will completely change how you think about workplace revenge. And trust me, what unfolded over the next 6 months was so perfectly orchestrated that it still gives me chills. Let me take you back to where this all started, because the betrayal runs deeper than you could ever imagine. 24 months ago, I was the golden child of TechFlow Solutions' enterprise sales division. But the story really begins with a decision I made that would either save my career or destroy it completely. What Lisa didn't know was that I had been secretly recording every conversation we'd had for the past 3 months. Every lie, every credit stolen, every moment of sabotage, all documented. But that's just the beginning of how I systematically dismantled her entire career while she thought she was destroying mine. 24 months ago, I was living the American dream at 27. Fresh out of Northwestern with my MBA, driving my silver Honda Civic to TechFlow's Chicago headquarters every morning with a venti pike place from Starbucks and genuine excitement for what the day would bring. My territory was the Midwest manufacturing sector, and I had this natural ability to connect with plant managers and procurement directors. While other reps were pushing features and benefits, I was sitting in factory break rooms sharing stories about my dad's construction company, building real relationships over gas station coffee and vending machine Snickers bars. The results spoke for themselves. My first quarter, I closed $2.3 million in deals, 180% of quota. Second quarter, $3.1 million. By year-end, I had brought in $11.7 million in revenue, making me the top performer in the entire company's history for a first-year rep. My direct manager then was this incredible woman named Jennifer Martinez. She was exactly what I hoped to become, sharp, strategic, but genuinely cared about her people. "Sarah," she'd say during our weekly one-on-ones at Corner Bakery, "you have something special. Don't let corporate politics dim that spark." Jennifer was grooming me for her role when she eventually moved up to regional director. She taught me advanced negotiation techniques, introduced me to C-level executives, and showed me how to navigate the complex approval processes that could make or break enterprise deals. Then Jennifer got the promotion to oversee the entire Western region. The timing couldn't have been worse because we were in the middle of our biggest opportunity ever, a potential $8 million contract with Morrison Manufacturing that would represent the largest single deal in company history. That's when Lisa Patterson entered my life like a tornado in a business suit. Lisa had been managing the smaller accounts team for 3 years. Decent enough manager, or so everyone thought. Always wore those perfectly pressed blazers from Taylor, had this way of making you feel heard during meetings. Her numbers were respectable but nothing extraordinary, consistently hitting 105 to 110% of team quota. When corporate announced she'd be taking over Jennifer's enterprise team, I felt disappointed but not devastated. I figured I could work with anyone, especially since I had already developed the entire Morrison Manufacturing strategy myself. That's when the first red flag appeared, bright as a stop sign. The first red flag should have been during Lisa's introductory team meeting at Panera Bread. She presented my Morrison Manufacturing strategy as if she had developed it herself. Every slide, every financial projection, every relationship map, all my work from the past 6 months. Not once did she mention my name. Not once did she acknowledge that every innovative approach came from my late nights at the office, my weekend research sessions, my breakthrough conversations with Morrison's procurement team over beers at Buffalo Wild Wings. I sat there watching her take credit for my discovery that Morrison was secretly evaluating a switch to automated inventory management, intel I'd gathered during a casual conversation with their plant supervisor while touring their facility in Milwaukee. She presented my competitive analysis, my pricing strategy, my implementation timeline, all as her own brilliant insights. But I convinced myself maybe she just forgot to mention it. Maybe she was nervous presenting to the team. Maybe she'd give me credit when we presented to upper management. She never did. Over the next 8 months, Lisa systematically began stealing every major breakthrough I produced. I would send her detailed account plans in our Monday morning meetings, and by Thursday, she'd be presenting them to our VP of Sales, Marcus Thompson, as her own strategic thinking. When I tried to speak up, she'd interrupt with things like, "Actually, Sarah, I think what you're trying to say is," and then proceed to repeat my exact words back to me as if she was clarifying my confused thoughts. The worst part wasn't even the theft itself. It was watching her get praised for my creativity while simultaneously criticizing my performance in front of others. She'd say things like, "Sarah struggles with big picture thinking right after implementing my big picture strategies." Or, "She needs to work on her presentation skills," while using the exact presentation techniques I had shared with her during our private coaching sessions. I started documenting everything. Every email, every meeting note, every timestamp of when I submitted ideas versus when she presented them. I even started using my iPhone to record our one-on-one meetings, keeping the phone face down on the table like I was just taking notes on it. But Lisa was smart. She never put the theft in writing. Everything happened in verbal conversations, in closed-door meetings, in casual discussions at Starbucks where there were no witnesses except my hidden recording app. Meanwhile, my official performance reviews started declining faster than GameStop stock. Lisa would write things like, "Shows potential but lacks leadership initiative, and needs improvement in innovative thinking," the same innovative thinking she was stealing and getting promoted for. I felt like I was losing my mind. Was I imagining this? Was I being paranoid? Then I started paying closer attention to her patterns, and I realized something crucial that would change everything. Lisa was completely dependent on my ideas. Without my creativity feeding her success, she had absolutely nothing original to offer. She was like a parasite that had found the perfect host. That's when I decided to run an experiment that would either confirm my suspicions or prove I was crazy. I started submitting mediocre work. Not terrible enough to get fired, but bland enough to be forgettable. When she asked for my input on deals, I'd offer safe, conventional suggestions that any average rep could have thought of. I stopped staying late to perfect my proposals. I stopped researching innovative solutions. I stopped being the creative powerhouse she'd been depending on. The results were immediate and devastating for her. Her next presentation to Marcus Thompson was a complete disaster. Without my insights to steal, she had nothing but generic sales speak and recycled strategies from our competitors. The Morrison manufacturing deal stalled because our proposal suddenly lacked the innovative edge that had differentiated us. 2 team members requested transfers because Lisa's leadership became increasingly erratic without my hidden support. She started micromanaging everyone, clearly panicking as her stolen success began crumbling. But while I was deliberately tanking my visible performance, I was secretly building something much bigger. I had noticed that our CEO, David Richardson, had an open-door policy for employees with genuine company improvement ideas. Most people were too intimidated to approach him directly, but I wasn't most people. I started requesting 15-minute meetings with him under the guise of discussing operational efficiency initiatives. During these secret meetings, I presented him with real solutions, revolutionary approaches to enterprise client retention, detailed plans for expanding into new manufacturing sectors, strategies for leveraging our technology platform that could generate millions in additional revenue. I never mentioned Lisa, never complained about my situation. I simply demonstrated my true capabilities while letting Lisa destroy her own credibility through increasingly desperate attempts to compensate for her sudden lack of original ideas. David was more than impressed. He started scheduling longer meetings with me, asking for my input on major strategic decisions. 3 weeks ago, he told me something that made my heart race with anticipation. "Sarah, I've been watching your work," David said during our meeting in his corner office overlooking Lake Michigan. "I think you're ready for a much bigger platform. I want you to present your enterprise growth strategy to our board of directors next month." The board presentation. The holy grail of corporate advancement. The opportunity that could catapult my career into the stratosphere. But here's what made it absolutely perfect. David had scheduled my board presentation for the same day as our quarterly sales meeting, the same meeting where Lisa had been planning to publicly humiliate me for my recent poor performance. I knew this because Lisa's assistant, Katie, had become friendly with me after noticing how strangely Lisa had been acting. Katie mentioned that Lisa had been working late, preparing what she called a presentation about accountability for the quarterly meeting. So there I was, sitting in that glass conference room, listening to Lisa systematically tear apart my character in front of everyone I worked with. She had prepared this whole speech about how some people just aren't cut out for the demands of enterprise sales. 23 pairs of eyes watching me like I was some kind of cautionary tale about hiring mistakes. Some people, Lisa continued, her voice getting louder with each word, refuse to take responsibility for their declining performance. They make excuses. They blame others. They lack the integrity to admit when they're simply not capable of meeting our standards. Every word felt like a physical assault. People were nodding along, my colleagues, people whose deals I'd helped close, people who'd borrowed my strategies and techniques. Some were checking their phones like they were bored by my public execution. Then Lisa delivered her final blow: "You're the worst hire we've ever made." The laughter that followed was the most humiliating sound I'd ever heard. 23 people I had helped, people whose commissions had benefited from my innovations that Lisa had stolen, were laughing at my professional funeral. That's when the conference room door opened. David Richardson stepped inside, his eyes scanning the room until they found mine. The laughter died instantly as he walked directly toward me with purpose and confidence. "Sorry I'm late for our board presentation," he said, his voice carrying across the now silent room. You could have heard a pin drop. 23 faces went from amusement to confusion to absolute shock as they realized what was happening. Lisa's expression shifted from triumph to terror as she began to understand that everything she thought she knew about the situation was completely wrong. I stood up slowly, gathering the presentation materials I had been hiding under my regular meeting notes. As I walked toward the front of the room, I could feel every set of eyes tracking my movement. The same people who had been laughing at me 90 seconds earlier were now staring in stunned silence. "Shall we begin?" David asked, taking a seat at the head of the conference table. What happened next was the most satisfying moment of my entire career. I began presenting the revolutionary enterprise growth strategy one had been developing during my secret meetings with David. Every slide was perfection. Every market analysis was meticulously researched. Every revenue projection was backed by solid data I'd gathered from my actual client relationships. As I spoke, I watched Lisa's face transform from confusion to recognition to absolute horror as she realized what was really happening. This wasn't just a presentation. This was a job interview. An interview for her position. The board members, who had joined via video conference, were asking detailed questions about implementation timelines, resource allocation, competitive positioning. I answered every single question with confidence and precision because I had lived and breathed this strategy for months. When I finished, the room erupted in applause. Not polite corporate clapping, but genuine enthusiasm for what they had just witnessed. David stood up and shook my hand, saying loud enough for everyone to hear, "Sarah, this is exactly the kind of visionary leadership our enterprise division needs moving forward." Then he turned to address the room. "I want everyone to know that Sarah will be taking over as our new director of enterprise sales, effective immediately." The silence was deafening. 23 people who had been laughing at my failure were now witnessing my triumph. But the best part wasn't my promotion. The best part was watching Lisa realize that her own behavior had been the architect of her destruction. Every time she had publicly criticized my performance while privately stealing my ideas, she had been digging her own grave. David continued, "Lisa, I'll need to see you in my office after this meeting to discuss your transition to a different role within the company." Different role. Corporate speak for demotion or termination. As people began filing out, several colleagues approached me with congratulations and apologies. They had witnessed the injustice but hadn't known how to address it. But I wasn't finished yet. I walked over to where Lisa sat frozen in her chair, her face pale and her hands trembling slightly. "Lisa," I said quietly, so only she could hear, "I want to thank you." She looked up at me with confusion. "Thank you for teaching me the most valuable lesson of my career. You showed me that the best way to expose someone's incompetence is to stop compensating for it. You taught me that people who steal credit can only succeed as long as they have something to steal." I paused, watching her process the full scope of what had just happened. You destroyed your own career by trying to destroy mine. And you never even realized I was deliberately handing you the rope. As I walked out of that conference room, I felt complete vindication. Not just professional success, but emotional justice. But the story doesn't end there. 3 days later, I was moving into Lisa's old office when I discovered something that made my blood run cold. Hidden in her desk drawer was a folder containing printed copies of all my recorded conversations I thought only I had been recording. Lisa had been recording me too, but for a different reason. The folder contained a detailed plan to build a case for my termination based on performance issues and attitude problems. She had been systematically documenting everything, planning to have me fired right after she finished stealing my Morrison manufacturing strategy. But here's the beautiful irony: those same recordings now proved her systematic theft of my ideas. Every conversation where she took credit for my work, every meeting where she undermined me while benefiting from my innovations, all documented in her own evidence folder. I turned everything over to HR and legal. Within a week, Lisa was terminated for cause, losing her severance package and potentially facing legal action for intellectual property theft. 6 months later, I closed the Morrison manufacturing deal for $8.2 million, the largest single contract in company history. My team of 12 enterprise reps is now the most successful division in the company, and every one of them gets full credit for their contributions. As for Lisa, last I heard, she's working at a small software company in the suburbs, managing a team of 3 inside sales reps and making half what she used to earn. She tried to steal my future, so I let her steal her own. The best revenge isn't always getting even. Sometimes it's simply letting people destroy themselves with their own greed and incompetence. Trust me on that one.